Hi there. We've made it halfway through the month so far, and I hope you're enjoying these interviews. If you're finding wisdom or moments of clarity in them, I want to let you know that there's a lot more. So there's not only 8 more interviews to come this month, but there's also going to be a Awaken Authenticity program, which will be a guided journey of the self. It'll be 4 months long, and you can undertake this either in a group setting or one-on-one with me. I will be sharing more about this soon, but I wanted to let you know what's coming up. And if you are interested in it and want to hear more about it now, you can go to awakenoauthenticity.com, click on book a session, and click on the discovery calls, which are free 30-minute conversations with me to see whether this is right for you or not. Enjoy. Welcome, everybody. It's Alyssum from Awaken Authenticity, and today I'm so happy to be sharing with you my very, very good friend, Jeramie Bellmay, who is an incredible artist of multiple media. He's a painter and a sculptor. He is a hair sculptor. He is a leather worker and various other things. Welcome, welcome, Jeramie.
Thanks for having me.
If you were to introduce yourself, and is there anything else that I forgot in the list of magic that you make?
So I now introduce myself as an elf because this really sums up who I am a lot more. I do so much, it is hard to open up the scroll in front of someone and be like, this is what I do.
I'll be releasing these in December, so the elf energy is strong.
But I've always been really interested in the synthesis of mediums. So I work with as many mediums as I possibly can, and I try to understand how they come together and how they can be used in situations to allow things to come through. So I'm doing everything from blacksmithing and metalworking, welding, casting, wood, leather, fibers, plastics. I'm currently kind of switching a little bit of my work into CNC and laser cutting, and kind of using new technology to allow me to take a bit of the work off my own physical body. And it really extends out. You know, it's the question is what needs to happen, and this allows me to understand what process and what mediums need to be used. And if I don't know how to use them, I learn how to use them.
Cool. What's CNC?
It's a router machine that works on an XYZ axis, so you can take a vector and put it into the machine, and using a rotary tool, it will cut through or engrave in whatever medium you're using. So it allows me to kind of format something, have a machine do the kind of foundation of the work, and then for me to do the fine detailing, which is kind of really my place.
Awesome. And are those pieces behind you, are those yours?
These are actually all not mine. I'm currently in my room, and I don't keep my artwork in my room. I keep artwork of the friends of mine in my room, and all of the kind of various little things that I've acquired throughout my life that are all of my pieces of my life altar are in my room. So
beautiful. The main reason that I wanted to talk to you is because I feel like you have a special understanding of what it's like to walk in the world and not necessarily fit in. As somebody who is both an artist, where I feel like artists often don't feel like they fit in, or at least they're battling the sort of like supposed to idea of success or whatever. And then identifying as an elf. I mean, like, there's so much about you that is magical and wonderful, but I'm sure that doesn't make it easy. And I was hoping that you could get really real with us about the positives and the negatives of living a very authentic life the way that you do.
There's definitely a lot of ups and downs to being in the creative path and being completely devoted to your creativity. I have always been really bold, although it has been challenging throughout my life to really be my most authentic self. I've always just been really bold. And I've always had this strong sense of self and self-worth that has really allowed me to always be in a place of just saying, well, this is who I am. I'm sorry. Like, if you can't understand where I'm coming from or you can't accept this, then that's fine. Go along your path. I'm going to continue along mine because I have to be true to myself.
Yeah.
Throughout my life, in any moment that I was not true to myself, it always came back around full circle. And I was always then faced with that. And it was always really unpleasant. So over the years, I've just learned to really be in my authenticity and to in a way, not care, to exist as if no one is watching me, even though a lot of times I'm the focal point. There's definitely a lot of eyes on me. And I think by being your most authentic self and really always like being present in that way, you then begin to attract that same authenticity. And although it may be hard kind of working through the matrix and getting through those kind of like murky layers, once you come through it, you often find that what you're putting out is then reflected back at you. So as I progress in my life, although I do feel like I am on the outside in a way, I also feel like I am then attracting the same energy as myself to myself.
Yeah. So can you give us an example? The two examples that I want to kind of tease out of what you said. The first one is when you were saying when anytime that you have gone against your own grain, so to speak, it's come around and bit you in the butt. Can you give us an example of that?
Examples are so hard. It's like in my recent life, I haven't gone against it because these were earlier lessons in my life. But let's say like elementary school, high school, to be in situations where I wanted to be accepted, or I didn't want to seem as bizarre as I am naturally. Sometimes you don't do the things that you truly want to do, and you kind of go along with what everyone else is doing. But when you're not being true to yourself, it just doesn't work out. You enter into a place of resistance because you are going against what you truly are. In any of these situations where, I had attempted to just fit in or to not express myself or to, hide my sexuality, it all just wasn't true to me. So I was manifesting something that was out of harmony with my true nature. And it's like the coming back around full circle can be really subtle, and other times it can be really abrupt and jarring, really depending on I think where you are personally in your path and what you need to learn. Now likewise, I also feel like we are always on our path. We are always in the correct place at the right time with the right people, because these are things that we have to learn. We kind of have to go through these situations to then see it, and then it's clear, and then it's so clear that you can't turn away from it, and you then have to accept that. And you either take that knowledge and you transform it into your own personal wisdom, and kind of move on, or you continue to fall back into that cycle and create the same thing.
Yeah, and for those of us who don't know your sexual identity, because you mentioned it, how would you describe that?
I consider myself to be a multi-spirited being. I really am trying to move away from dualism. I think that we are labeling everything, and within the definition of that labeling, we are actually diminishing the infinite potential of what that is. So I'm a transient spirit,
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm so glad I interviewed you, that I'm interviewing you. I mean, I feel like these are the sorts of things that people don't necessarily even think about on a day-to-day basis, and I know that it's such an integral part of your life that asking it is almost probably a little jarring, having me ask it. But I feel like I agree. I think that there's a lot of duality in the world that really just creates us and them. And, most of the time there's a duality. The reality of that duality is that there's a spectrum between those two positions.
Exactly.
And my experience has been that even if you identify heavily with one side or another, there's a lot of, if it's black and white, there's a lot of gray that's really worth exploring, even if you don't identify yourself with, the other colors.
This is the ancient understanding. It's the understanding of a spectrum. And really, when we touch on sexuality, what we were actually talking about is we were talking about androgyny.
Mm-hmm.
And the archetype of androgyny is really beautiful because it stands in between the worlds. And it also then brings everything into question, because this kind of linear process that we're working within, it questions it, and it says, well, okay, that's fine, you're over there and you're over there, but I'm in between and I'm both. Mm-hmm. Right? What does that mean? And it really poses that there's another way. Mm-hmm. That the perceivable way within the confines of our current matrix is not the only way, and that there is something else to be seen.
And what do you mean by matrix?
The system of thoughts and ideas that governs the way that we think and perceive within the world.
Mm-hmm. Would it be fair to correlate that to a culture or society or family expectation, all of the above?
All of the above. I mean, definitely it is the system of the world that we are inundated and indoctrinated by. And it, in so many ways, through all sources of media, right? All sources of media are data coming through the matrix, are influencing the way that we live our lives, and how we function in society. And it's actually programming us to believe that we are supposed to be a certain way. Mm-hmm. And in all honesty, the majority of that is actually out of harmony with us truly being our most authentic selves. Mm-hmm. In a lot of ways, the matrix is currently saying, buy this, wear this, do this, be this. Mm-hmm. Now.
Right.
I said, no, I'm going to make my own clothes. I'm going to do what I want. I don't even want to buy your stuff.
And how do we as individuals break through with clarity and intent?
I think that we have to start going in. I think that we've been acquiring all of our information externally, and I think that we need to open up an internal dialogue and really tap in and relearn how to draw energy and information through ourselves, and to actually download that, because we are connected to everything in the cosmos. And if you open yourself up, if you kind of reopen yourself, you then are able to start to channel information through various means. Each person has their own understanding of what is happening internally with them. Mm-hmm. But I think that that's really the best way. And I personally, in my own life, doing this, practicing this, and really using it as like a means of communicating with all of my surroundings. What's interesting is I then get confirmation through my life. And now I actually find that books are more a confirmation to the energy that I'm bringing through myself and the new understandings that are then coming in, than me going to the book to actually find the information. And I think that we really open up this very really beautiful esoteric conversation, with our immediate surroundings, extending out into the cosmos.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I totally identify with that. I feel like when I read a good book, a lot of it is a validation of where I'm coming from. So I'm really happy. That's the first time I've heard someone else express that, and that makes me really happy to hear. Yeah. Also, it comes back to something earlier when I said there was two things that I wanted to draw out of you, and you were talking about confirmation, about how when you are acting upon the things that makes the most sense to you internally, you get confirmation externally. And you were talking earlier about that confirmation in terms of being an artist and having, I'm guessing, people pay you and validate the work that you do as something that they connect with as well. Can you talk a little bit about that relationship?
What do you mean exactly?
So when I'm thinking about when I am doing my best artwork that is the most authentically myself, and then I have people in the audience or around me either paying to watch me or purchasing a piece of my work. When they say either with their dollars or with their words that they really appreciate and connect with the work that I have been doing creatively. This is my own experience. My experience is that it's an incredibly validating, incredibly meaningful, and to know that you have a shared experience with someone that you don't necessarily even know, and to know that you are providing them with something where they say, yes, that, like, I haven't been able to express that, and the way that you did it makes me feel like I'm seen and like my experience is worthwhile. I don't know, that's something that I find very gratifying as an artist, and I was wondering if you could articulate how the relationship between an artist and the purchaser, maybe, I guess, or something like that, how that relationship is for you.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes your time and energy worth it, you know, when that does happen. For me, I'm really looking at, is my work pure,
Mm-hmm.
right? Am I really tapping in a way that true divination is happening? Because that's kind of the relationship that I see. And this really takes me to like my core understanding of what is art.
Mm-hmm.
And art, when in a line with the divine order, has the potential to alter the synapses of the mind and literally draw things up through people and bring them to the forefront of their consciousness so that they then begin to process their own internal workings. So a lot of times, you know, that kind of like that confirmation, that validation is coming through me witnessing that the energy that I have converted, right? Because to me, art is transmuted source energy, right?
Mm-hmm.
I can process this in a way, bring it through myself, transmute it, and reform it in a way that is more digestible, right?
Mm-hmm.
When I do that, and it is truly in harmony, when I bring something pure through, someone will weep. Literally, someone will cry. It will literally take the trauma of their existence, and it will jolt it in a way. It'll stir them so that they can get into that and then begin to process it. And I feel that art is working on like a very like subconscious, like very subtle energetic levels. But you know, that's really it, more so than anyone buying it or even saying anything. Like I feel it, that I mean the second that it happens, I feel it, and that's really beautiful to me, because for me my foundation is as a healer, right? And the art has healed me, you know, in many ways. And you know, I've been devoted to mediums and creativity for 25 years now. So now I understand how to use the mediums, right? Meaning that I can communicate with the medium, that I can understand its language, and then use that language and transfer that energy and shift that energy and move it through people.
Yeah. And I love the idea of sort of what I'm hearing is that art is a way that the audience, it's like it's a shortcut to that source energy. Like you've put your deep time, effort, and spirit into understanding and presenting it in a way that is more accessible, perhaps.
Yeah.
And it acts as I love the idea that it acts as a shortcut to to the idea that we should be turning into internally.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of become the portal and the conduit,
Mm.
which really kind of is this quantum leap, you know. So it is a shortcut. Yeah. I think that it's also, I believe that there are different frequencies that humans are functioning at,
Mm-hmm.
and um, in my experience, the highest frequency is going to be able to get the first wave of energy, and then that energy is then processed through, and it is transferred in a way that is then digestible for the next frequency, and likewise for the next frequency. And I believe that this is actually a greater functioning of how we work on a whole together.
And when you're talking about frequencies, what do you mean?
This for me comes back to Mayan and Aztec cosmology.
Okay.
And I'm really fascinated by their cosmology because it's the only calendar system that I have found thus far that is an actual accurate scaling of time, because that's what a calendar is actually supposed to do. If we look at our Gregorian calendar, it doesn't actually do that
Right.
at all. It's based on a monetary system that has been curated in this kind of bizarre way. Whereas the foundation of the Mayan cosmology connects to the human. So it's broken down into a 1320 frequency, which connects to our 20 fingers and toes, as well as our 13 major joints. And then what's really beautiful is that it expands out into the timing of each planet. Right, so you then get all of these larger scales that work within each other. And what's actually interesting is we just came to the close of the longest scale within their cosmology, which means that we are currently opening up a completely new paradigm. And so the end of this was December 21st, 2012, and the media hyped this incredibly to get everyone to then be like, oops, nothing happened again. That meant nothing, when it's actually this very profound moment of this incredible shift that is happening. And really, if you ask me, we're actually currently in the apocalypse. If you look at the definition of the apocalypse, it's actually the unveiling, which doesn't necessarily mean it has to be this end of the world dystopian kind of like thing. It's the death of the old ways of thinking and the death of the old paradigm. But I digress a bit. So this is one of the systems that have allowed me to see that humans are functioning at a different frequency, and in a greater kind of look at this, then how do the frequencies then work together to pass information along, as well as how do they work with each other to work for the greater good and to develop things.
Cool. That was a really, I appreciate your succinct description of the Mayan calendar. You did it so quickly and easily.
There's so much more to it. It's really...
I know, but that was like, you know, that's a really good overview. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about some of your so uplifting, I know, but could you tell us about some of your failures? Tell us about like how you move through failure, and or what they have meant to you since.
Well, my creative failures, which, for the sake of understanding what we're talking about, we can say that they're failures. I am always trying to pull myself back to, how do I step away from duality, right? So to say that this was a success or this was a failure, right, that's actually weird. The truth is that it's all refinement, right? We are in a perpetual state of refining ourselves. So I try to pull myself away from the concept of failure, because failure puts me in this weird place of I'm not good enough, I'm not relevant, I'm not doing what I should be, and that's not true.
Totally. I mean, I think that is exactly why, that is a perfect example of why duality can be dangerous, right? Like, so many people live in that world of I'm not good enough. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm you know, they're going to find out that I don't know what I'm doing, or whatever, all these imposter syndromes and stuff. And I think that, you touching on that and kind of recognizing that it's all about refinement. Oh my God, thank you. Yes.
We need
Keep
to be
going.
more accepting of ourselves, you know, and we need to be able to say, okay, that didn't work out exactly as I had planned it, but it has led me to a new understanding that allows me to move in this new way, you know? So there have definitely been moments of feeling failure for sure, but let's try to pull ourselves out of that. So then, okay, in all of my situations of refinement that haven't gone in the way that I had envisioned or the way that I would have liked, there's actually been quite a few, and I think that this is really this is the path of the artist, because to be an artist you have to learn how to really screw things up. Really, you have to learn how to make really big mistakes, and then you have to figure out how to work through those mistakes, because that's just the reality. You can't be an artist and everything just works out perfectly and, you know, it's just always flowing out of you. That's just not the case. You have to go through very, very challenging processes of problem solving. So I have gone through so many, I've been doing commission work for the last 10 years. I've gone through so many projects that were just heart-wrenching, just in so many ways didn't work out as they should have. You know, I've been not necessarily treated the best in a lot of situations, and I really think that this is more largely to the effect that the artist is misunderstood in the world, and people don't realize the extreme that we're put through to stay within this devotion to this thing that we're birthing through ourselves. You know, it isn't just this external object. Like when I'm truly working, I'm communicating with things and I'm drawing this thing through myself. And in so many ways, I'm literally in a way birthing it into the world. So now what's beautiful is with all of this kind of, you know, this pain and having to work through things and really having to kind of like get into it and solve it, it's brought me to these kind of new questions and this new understanding of why. You know, a lot of these situations didn't work out because the truth is it wasn't all in harmony. And in a lot of these situations, I knew it prior to going into it, but we also have to accept the fact that we live within a capitalist society and we have to make our money, and this kind of forces us into situations. Now, whenever I encounter anything, I say, why?
Yeah.
Why will I sacrifice my time, my energy, my health, my well-being? For what reason will I do this? Is there truly something that we can benefit from by this coming through me?
Yeah.
And you know, and in a really large way, it's redefining my system, my value system, which I think is really important, because when I look at the world, what I'm seeing is a world without values and a world that has not reassessed their values in a very, very long time. So currently, we are flooding ourselves with toxicity. We are flooding the world with toxicity. We are allowing this to happen, and we are not truly being in our most authentic place and saying, what is actually for the good of all, you know? So, you know, so it's really interesting. I had to go through a lot of the trauma in my life to be able to come to this new understanding and really reach this new place of really assessing what's happening creatively and really being able to assess what I should be putting my energy into, and likewise how I then guide what's going on around me to something that is more harmonious.
And is that so when you ask yourself why, I'm imagining that this is sort of a rhetorical question, but perhaps it's not. Is there an answer to the question why that always gives you like a full body yes, this is worth doing? Or does that change from project to project? Or
I mean, it definitely morphs. You know, I would also say that I'm only 30 and I'm 31 and I have 2 spinal injuries. I have a neck injury. I have a low back injury. I have an injury in each shoulder. I have tendonitis. I have carpal tunnel. I have sciatica. I studied classical dance for 10 years and continue to dance for long durations of time in a static state. So my hips, my knees, and my ankles also, it's you know, it's very real. So the question why for me also comes back to the value of my own life and my own being. You know, so that's actually, I would say that's the foundation of it. Like,
Yeah.
why will I injure myself for this potentially? You
Right.
know, in everything else, it's dependent on the situation, and it's dependent on who I'm working with and why this vision needs to come through.
Yeah, I really appreciate that very grounded and earth-based uh, recognition of what we are given, as somebody who deals with chronic pain and chronic health issues myself. I think, and as somebody who wants to help other people through their chronic issues, I think that that's a really, really important piece to acknowledge, not just for ourselves, but also for people around us who aren't as familiar as dealing with chronic issues, and recognizing that these are the realities that we have. And for me, part of the reason that I want other people to recognize that a multitude of people have to deal with these chronic issues is just so that they take their health less for granted. It's not that I want attention or anything like that. I really want just people to be aware of and appreciate the body that they're given, in whatever state it's in.
Yeah. And I mean, they might not have that situation right now, but there's also the potential that they will then develop this in the future. And I would never wish that's the struggle that I experience on anyone. So
Yeah.
likewise, you know, a lot of it really is to prevent that
Yeah.
from happening to anyone else.
Right. Yeah. And it's also really interesting to me because to me, you are a very magical person and a very sort of ethereal person, and to be living in the world in a body that doesn't perform the way that you would want it to all the time. I mean, that brings you earthbound. That brings you very much in the realm of the rest of us. And I don't know. What do you say?
Very much so.
Yeah. Can you talk about that, as far as a little bit more about how that limitation or expression has limited or expanded your idea of what is authentic for you?
Well, it took me a while to figure out what was going on, and then it kind of dawned on me, and I was like, my passion exceeds my physical body.
Mm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
it's, for me, I can't just allow it to just flow through me, right? I've had to learn how to control that energy coming through me, so that it doesn't work me to my bitter end. Because it will. Really, the creative force is something very powerful when you truly tap into it. And when you have this kind of passion, it like, and I can say this from my own personal experience, like with what I put my body through, it will take you to the end.
Mm-hmm.
And it can really be very taxing. Personally, for me now, what I've had to do is I've had to redefine the pain. Pain to me now is not being able to get up out of bed.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else, I try to not define as pain.
Mm-hmm.
I try to understand it as something that I'm working through, a subtle disturbance in my body that I can communicate with, to work myself through it. Because otherwise I wouldn't be doing anything.
Yeah.
And likewise, you know, as someone who has, you know, as far as my numerology goes, I have the mark of the master teacher. This is something that is really near and dear to me, and really actually changed my perception within the world, because it allowed me to understand that I don't need to be a part of this like fame art culture, that I acquire information so that in every situation I can help birth the vision through, because I have acquired the information to then pass down. But also, you know, being in the place of the teacher in that way, you know, and being in so much pain, it also puts me in a place of being very real with everything around me, and, you know, really kind of like tuning things, because I think a lot of people don't realize how hard the struggle can be. And it gives me that bit of understanding to be able to push people, but not push them too far. you know, so
Yeah.
that they're lifted out of their stagnance, but they're also not destroying themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is super fascinating for me because I feel like I'm coming from the other side of it a little bit. Like um, I have I was told by two of my surgeons that I had an incredibly high pain tolerance, and I didn't really know what they meant until I realized when I when I tore my ACL in my knee, and I was offered a ride down the mountain because I couldn't go down the mountain. I was skiing, downhill skiing, and they took me down to the bottom of the hill, and they were like, "Do you want to go to the first aid tent?" And I said, "No, I'll just wait here. And I'll go to the restaurant and wait for my friends to be done, and then we'll go to the emergency room later on. But like nothing's gonna get worse by me just hanging out." So I stood up and I went into shock. And I realized at that moment, oh, that's what they mean by I have a really high pain tolerance. Like my body goes into shock before it feels pain. So I asked them, yes, please do take me to the first aid tent. And the people that were working there were like, wait, what do you mean you're going into shock? How do you know what shock feels like? I was like, I've gone into shock a few times. I know what shock is like. And they're like, that is so bizarre. You don't feel any pain, but you're going into shock and you know what that's totally not normal. So for me, like, and coming from a family where like you just do it, like whatever needs to be done, you do it and get up off your butt, and like doesn't matter what's going on, just like the stagnancy is not an option. And so I think that I sort of learned what you had to teach yourself, which is not to feel pain. And so I'm doing the opposite now and teaching myself what pain is, because it's sort of like the feeling of like satiety, or like when you feel like you've been hungry or thirsty and then you slake that thirst, or you give yourself food and you're no longer hungry. You have people are supposed to have a feeling of pain so that they stop doing whatever's causing them pain. And I ignored that for so long. Now I'm trying to teach myself what pain is, so that when I'm exhausted, for instance, I can recognize that the reason I'm exhausted is because I'm in pain and not just like I'm randomly exhausted. What is this all about? But all of this to say, like, I just think it's really interesting how chronic pain can even be expressed and experienced so differently in two different bodies. And that's just so important to remember, especially when we're in a teaching role, especially when we're talking with, anybody at any, whether it's pain and physical bodies or whatever, like everybody experiences even the same thing completely differently.
Yeah. And I think likewise, we're also doing the same thing. We are redefining our internal understanding to come to a balance.
Mm-hmm.
So and I think that that's what's so beautiful is, although we might actually also come from these completely different perspectives and places, in its essence, we're actually doing the same thing kind of in reverse to each other.
Yeah. I mean, and I have to say, I do like that I don't have I do like that I have a high pain tolerance. It definitely makes getting up and doing stuff a lot easier. I just have to remember to give myself a break at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So, one of the things that you had said earlier that you wanted to make sure that we talked about is the idea of using authenticity as a way to overcome insecurities and find your truest form. Do you want to talk any more about that?
I think that to be in your most authentic self, you have to be bold. You have to be daring. You have to not care what the world around you thinks, and you yourself have to be defined.
Defined or defiant?
Well, both.
Okay.
But I said defined.
Okay.
And what I mean by that is, when something external comes at you and is bringing you some sort of negativity or putting you down, by being your most authentic and already defining yourself, that information has no validity to you at all. That comes to you and your core being says, actually, no, that's not me at all. I'm sorry that you have mistaken something somewhere along the way, you know, and it then disregards that. And I think that by being there, you really start to work through your deepest insecurities and the things that are kind of creating the resistance in your life and not allowing you to get to your true potential.
I like that. Okay. So if you have defined yourself, I'm going to challenge you here a little bit. So if you have defined yourself and you're looking for your true potential, does that mean that you've defined what your potential is?
Not necessarily. It's to say that I am powerful, I am beautiful, I am relevant, I am accepted, right? So if someone comes along and says, you have no power, you're not beautiful, you have no relevance, the core essence of my being understands purely that that is not so. Right. So if you can, because if your being does not know that and they come along and say that, you literally fall into your insecurity, you fall out of your authenticity, and you literally are swirling around in this place of sadness and turmoil.
Yeah.
You know, which takes you away from the vision that you're working towards, the vision that you're opening up to. You know, it brings you away from calling in the things that you know that you deserve the most.
Yeah. Yeah. So another potential challenge to that idea is just, do you think that that we have a core being that is sort of a static idea, or do you think that we can be authentic and change over time, etc.?
This is something I do think about a lot. I'm not going to say that I have the answer, but a lot of what I contemplate is how many spirits we are comprised of that creates this perspective in the greater consciousness. I think that we have the ability to tap into so many different aspects of us. And we have the ability to then change and evolve. I think that there's so many different layers within this question.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that we are developing this core, right? Something that solidifies us and something that allows us to have that grounded sense of being. I think that everything is amorphic, though. You know, it's like, I mean, we can go into so many different quantum dimensions and tap into so many different quantum selves and acquire so many different pathways of our infinite potentials within this, you know, this experience that we're all experiencing.
I'm laughing because I'm thinking of Rick and Morty.
I'm not up to date on it, so.
Okay. It's a cartoon about multiverses, and it's totally irreverent and amazing. And
you know, so I mean, we are meant to be refining and evolving. You know, so of course we are not the same person that we were a moment ago. We're moving through all of these things. So I think that, you know, we develop our sense of being, and then we have to bring in an assessment of our values and the way that we function within the world. And I think that we then reform, and then we have to reassess, and we reform, and we have to reassess. So I think that it goes in all directions, you know.
I like that. Jeramie, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Before we go, if there was somebody who was sitting in front of you who was feeling stuck or unfulfilled in their life, what bit of suggestion or advice would you give that person to feel more fully awakened in their lives?
One, I would say relax. Just relax. Two, I think that a lot of what is happening in the world is we are not truly acknowledging the fact that we are a receiver and we are not truly acknowledging the fact that we are both sending and receiving transmissions. The modern world wants you, and the ego within the modern world says, these are my thoughts. I think these. This is my intellectual property. And I think that we really need to step away from this whole concept, because I believe that it's completely false, right? And I think we need to step into an understanding that we have infinite access to the universe, and likewise there are many things that can be sending transmissions to us. So when these more negative things come into your mind, we don't have to accept the thought. We really don't. We can actually completely interrogate these things that are coming at us. And it's in a very simplistic way, just acknowledge the thought that's coming through, and it's, question, like, who is this? What is this? Where does this information come from? Is this information actually here to serve me? And someone might feel like to say to serve me is like too much. No, is this actually here to serve you? And is this actually there to bring you to your highest potential? And when we do this, we begin to start to strip out all of this stuff that is controlling our lives and trying. I believe that there are many, many things that are engaging with us at all times. And I don't think that it's all pure. I don't think that it's all good. And I think that we have to really work with ourselves internally to get to a place where we are so solid within our mind. The modern world is very weak in the mind. We have to really solidify this, and we have to acknowledge what is coming at us. And we have to start to weed out all of this nonsense. And I believe that what happens in my own personal experience, and I'm still working through this, is we move from the reactionary into the ability to act. Because when you have all this stuff flooding you and you're literally being torn by it, what you do is you become reactionary to it. And what this does is it takes you out of your own path. It takes you out of the thing that you know that you need to get to, and it takes you away from the things that you know that you deserve. So much of the world wants to pull us away and to not allow us to get to that. And deep down, you know that you're powerful. You know that you have great worth. You know that you're here for a reason, and you know that it is incredibly beautiful, and that we are incredibly blessed to even be able to have this experience together.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I love that, the idea that of being a receptacle, having inspiration come in. I mean, I think that the best things that I have ever done myself have come from inspiration that it was like sort of like sudden in a dream, or just like sudden daydreaming, but they were ideas that didn't come necessarily step by step by my methodical thinking. They were things that just came as a flash of inspiration. And I feel like being open enough and being able to accept the stuff that you're saying really does serve you well, as inspiration, and then being free enough from the rest of the junk that you can actually act on it. That is super important. That's a huge lesson and practice that never ends, and has been incredibly helpful in my life. Sure.
Likewise, it has changed my life to kind of adopt this different understanding of how we're functioning within the world. I had I watched an interview this morning by a guy named Larry Yang, who's a Buddhist teacher, and he was saying that mindfulness is challenged by he was talking about social media and the internet and how amazing it is, but how the inundation of this immediacy, he was like, mindfulness is challenged by immediacy. And I think that's a really interesting thought to think about, and kind of connected to to these concepts of where we have all this access to so many things now. And sometimes you have to, like you said, relax, take a step back, be mindful, don't be reactionary, don't respond immediately, take the time to think or not think about whatever it is, as the case may be. Yeah.
Thanks again so much, and I will talk to you soon.
Thanks, love. When we speak of authenticity, there's this simplicity to it too. You know, it's like we can even connect this to our greater purpose here on Earth. Why are we here? You know, it is to be your most authentic self.